To help support our show, subscribe to Left Voice on Patreon so that we can continue to bring you more articles and episodes like this.
Welcome back to The Red Thread, a Left Voice podcast where we bring theory to life and talk about how to dismantle capitalism, one conversation at a time. I'm Melanie.
And I'm Emma.
With the NYC mayoral elections just 2 months away, we're talking about one of the most important developments for the left right now, Zohran Mamdani's win in the Democratic mayoral primary and his ongoing campaign to win the election in November.
In the middle of a super reactionary national context with Trump making authoritarian advances, the phenomenon behind Zohran's candidacy has been a progressive counter-tendency, even a symbol of hope for many people, and has had ripple effects way beyond New York City.
Mamdani's platform and proposals are progressive for the most part. His platform speaks to the aspirations of working-class New Yorkers. He wants to freeze the rent, make the buses fast and free, and provide universal free childcare. He's also pushing to tax the rich and says he will make NYC an LGBTQIA+ sanctuary city.
Mamdani also received support from the pro-Palestine movement, which has led a historic rupture with Zionism, despite how much support for Israel is entrenched in New York City's government and economy.
And it has implications beyond NYC as well. New York is the heart of global finance and a symbol of capitalist opulence, and his win expresses a repudiation of neoliberalism and the city being run by and for billionaires.
Yeah, and it also revealed broad discontent with an unaffordable city, anger at the Democratic Party establishment, a desire to fight the far right, and a hunger for new political representation. But it's definitely not without its contradictions and limits. Mamdani has a pragmatic program that's limited to minor reforms, but ultimately do not seriously touch or challenge the capitalist structure of the city.
Right. We'll talk about what the Mamdani moment means for the fight for socialism, the creeping limits of reformism, the dangers of the Democratic Party, and our ideas for the way forward as revolutionary socialists. So let's jump in, and we would love to hear what you think after listening.
So as of mid-September, when we're recording this episode, Zohran Mamdani is leading in the polls by a solid 19 points, with Cuomo, Sliwa, and Adams trailing behind in that order.
There is something deeply funny about seeing corrupt cop Eric Adams that far behind as an incumbent, no less.
I know, right? And this shows a rejection of not only Adams, but also sexual harasser Andrew Cuomo.
But that wasn't a given, right? Cuomo's campaign was backed by a strong Zionist lobby and a multi-million-dollar campaign of fear-mongering, racism, and anti-Muslim hate. And money buys real influence when it comes to public opinion in NYC.
So in this, Zohran's primary win reflects an important progressive shift among New York City voters, which I think we can attribute to a couple of different factors, which are all intertwined.
Let's start with a thing that many consider to be the heart of his campaign: his persistent focus on affordability.
Here in New York City and across the country, the working class suffers the same issues: high cost of living, unaffordable rents, high cost of transport, a lack of access to education, healthcare, and food, and a rising rate of unemployment that's becoming a structural problem for precarious youth in the US.
And things could look even worse with the impacts of Trump's Big Beautiful Bill. People are losing their healthcare because of Medicaid cuts, and paying for college is going to be even more difficult as federal loans are more difficult to get, and the continued uncertainty about tariffs, employment, and hints at a looming recession.
Today, the minimum wage in New York City is $16.50 an hour, but a single adult needs $28.04 an hour just to survive.
Yeah, that's why people are fed up against the candidates who put us in the current situation. NYC is becoming more and more unsustainable for working class people.
Besides affordability, another key issue is the fight against the Trump administration and its authoritarian and undemocratic measures.
As we're seeing from California to Washington, D.C., the Trump administration is increasingly using armed federal agents to advance an authoritarian right-wing political project. And he has named NYC among the next targets of his attacks.
It's very clear that Trump will not accept even the minimal demands put forward by Mamdani's campaign, nor any limit on ICE in the city. Trump's attacks on Mamdani go way beyond his candidacy. They're a threat to the entire New York City working class and oppressed communities, especially immigrants.
As we explained in a previous episode, the changes in ICE are more consequential than the deployment of the National Guard in cities or in DC. This is an agency directly tied to the executive, politically and financially. It's becoming an armed branch of the administration.
To make things even smoother for the administration, the Supreme Court decided last week that ICE is allowed to racially profile people according to how they look and the language they speak. This ruling confirms and legitimizes the completely racist nature of ICE and the role of ICE agents across the country. As of now, ICE is the institutional bridge between the American bipartisan regime and the far-right militias.
We cannot accept interference of any kind from Trump, who has threatened to send the National Guard to NYC. We must be ready to fight back against all attacks on our democratic rights by the Trump administration and the far right.
Yeah, and if Trump were to try to mess with the results of the election or attack Mamdani using his executive powers, that would be a violation of all of our democratic rights, and it would pave the way for worse and escalating attacks from Trump.
Regardless of whether or not we agree with Zohran, we as workers and socialists know that an attack on Zohran from the right means that they're preparing to come after even more oppressed groups in this city. And we have to stand up for each other against Trump and all his evil buddies.
Another extremely important factor behind Mamdani's popularity is the pro-Palestine movement.
Mamdani's momentum and outreach among young people is anchored in the cause of Palestine, where the genocide has triggered a historic rupture with Zionism and has increasingly challenged the previously unquestioned idea of the state of Israel's right to exist, legitimacy guaranteed by imperialist powers since the Nakba.
According to a poll released in July from Data for Progress, before images of Israel's forced starvation made major headlines, I'm going to quote here, not only did the vast majority of voters in New York City's Democratic primary for mayor agree with Mamdani's platform supporting Palestinian rights, but his pro-Palestinian platform may also have activated new voters and can serve as a blueprint for the Democratic Party going forward.
The poll found that 78% of New Yorkers think Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, 79% support restricting weapons to Israel, and 63% support arresting Netanyahu if he visits New York.
In the context of repression of the Palestine movement, and from different angles, the lack of initiative from the leadership of unions and the Palestine movement to really build a struggle in the streets, this pro-Palestine sentiment is primarily being expressed at the polls.
Definitely. In a Zionist stronghold like NYC and a mayoral race marked by support for Israel, his support for Palestine is not a footnote. As a result, he's been maligned by those who equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism and has been the target of vicious Islamophobia.
The left has to completely oppose these attacks and any anti-democratic maneuvers that might be pulled of the November election.
At the same time, we have to be aware of his contradictions on Palestine. For example, he's shifted to the right on this issue, signaling to business leaders and party officials that he won't cross their red lines by doing things like repeating the slogan, "Globalize the Intifada."
He's also submitted to the Zionist insistence that Israel has the right to exist as a state with equal rights, which basically is legitimizing a state that was founding on ethnic cleansing and is currently committing a genocide.
And I want to point out, Zohran's gradual shift towards being softer on Zionism isn't an accident. It's the price of running as a Democrat, of staying within the framework of that imperialist party, and therefore the ruling class's political vision for Israel, Palestine, and the entire Middle East.
Another really strong link between Mamdani's current success and the ongoing movement for Palestine was on display at his recent visit to Brooklyn College, which is a CUNY school, for a rally with Bernie Sanders.
Yes, so for some background, there's currently a campaign to reinstate 4 CUNY professors who were fired by the CUNY administration after prominently acting in solidarity with Palestine. At the rally with Mamdani and Sanders, dozens of members of PSC CUNY, which is the union representing the university's faculty and staff, as well as community supporters, were flyering to bring attention to the fired 4 and to invite Mamdani to speak about them during his visit.
We'll talk more about this in a coming episode, but just to say for now, Mamdani did take a moment when addressing the crowd to directly speak about the ongoing repression at the university, calling out the CUNY administration for its McCarthyist attacks on faculty and speaking out in defense of the fired 4.
His statement was met with thunderous applause, a standing ovation from the crowd, and chants of "Free, Free Palestine," all in support of the fired 4 and in defiance of the CUNY administration's attacks against the Palestine movement. This shows the willingness of the student movement to fight against the attack on the right to protest, freedom of speech, and the fight for Palestine.
Yeah, so it was a pretty powerful moment in that ongoing fight against repression. But, and I'm kind of hinting here about some of the limits of Mamdani's strategy, which we'll talk more about soon, even though he rightfully criticized the repression of professors and the encampments on CUNY's campuses, we know that as mayor, he would be in the position of containing such resistance anytime it risks upsetting business as usual in the country's financial capital.
Exactly. In fact, Mamdani is already cozying up to liberal Democratic politicians like Obama and showing that he's willing to step back from some of his more radical positions to distance himself from the DSA in order to appease the financial and business interests of the city's elite.
Yeah, and the pressure to fall in line will be even greater after he wins.
Like Bernie Sanders back in 2016, Mamdani's campaign brought the word socialism to the forefront, and it resonated with hundreds of thousands in NYC and beyond. He openly denounces inequality and has asserted that billionaires should not exist, which speaks to a widely felt anger at capitalism after several years of a post-COVID labor resurgence, nearly 2 years of mobilizations against the genocide in Gaza, and over 6 months of protests against ICE and Trump.
Tens of thousands of people signed up to canvass for the campaign, reflecting an energized base that wants to fight for more than the crumbs this decaying system offers us.
So true. But also, the thing is that we need to use this energy to organize independently of the capitalists, not allow our movements to be channeled back into the capitalist, pro-genocide, pro-cop, and anti-immigrant Democratic Party.
It's impossible to achieve an affordable New York City without attacking the interests of the ruling class. The developers, the private schools, corporations, financial capital, insurance companies, big pharma, and so on. And without breaking with the Democratic Party. We've already mentioned here the limits around Palestine, but there's also the topic of the police, which Zohran has similarly backtracked on. During Black Lives Matter in 2020, he was for defunding the police, but now he says they have a critical role to play in the city and promises to maintain their funding. He also recently apologized for calling them racist back in 2020.
The NYPD already has more funding than the entire military of most countries, and it is used to brutalize and harass Black and brown people, to repress protests, and provide armed protection for the rich and their private property. Instead of abolishing or even defunding the police, Mamdani would be in charge of them as mayor.
And again, this is the price he has had to pay to get the support he needs from the establishment Democrats. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, recently announced her endorsement of Mamdani, reserving the right to passionately disagree with him sometimes.
The key point we want to make with these examples is that by running for office as a Democrat and defining himself as one, Zohran reinforces the idea that the Democratic Party is a viable place for socialists to do politics, rather than building an independent party that unapologetically fights for the interests of the working class and oppressed.
By advancing the logic that he can win the battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, Mamdani's campaign is serving to generate enthusiasm for that party, the party responsible for building up ICE and funding the genocide in Gaza.
Rebuilding the Democratic Party is not the way forward for a left that is serious about fighting for and winning a firmly anti-capitalist program.
Zohran's campaign has been endorsed by a powerful block of unions, including DC 37, UAW Region 9A, the Hotel Gaming and Trades Council, NISNA, 32BJ SEIU, the NYC Central Labor Council, IATSE Local 161, PSC CUNY, Local 372, SEIU CIR, Teamsters Local 804, and my very own union, the United Federation of Teachers.
And many of these endorsements came from the organizing of rank-and-file workers who decided to put their support behind Mamdani, directing their union leaderships to do the same.
Together, these unions represent hundreds of thousands of workers in New York City and could massively mobilize against ICE, against repression, and against all the far-right attacks.
Our power is in our workplaces, our schools, our neighborhoods, and the streets, not in backroom meetings with politicians. The path forward is not found in relying on reforms from above. It is in mobilizing, striking, holding democratic assemblies, and organizing to win from below. Now is the time to break decisively with the Democrats to build an independent working class alternative.
Exactly. To truly end inequality in New York, we need more than a progressive mayor. We need to organize the city and society from the bottom up. We need a fighting program that places the needs of the many above the profits of the few.
In the coming period, we should discuss how do we defend NYC from attacks from Trump and the far right? How do we fight for and defend these reforms and fight for much more? And also, how do we maintain political clarity when the constraints of capitalism lead to blocked agendas or betrayals?
And also, how do we use the struggles ahead for Palestine, against ICE, against our bosses, to build democratic organizations that outlast any mayoral term, that can fight outside the campaign cycle and with our own methods?
We are not in the same place as 2016. From Sanders to AOC, we've already seen the consequences of a dead-end strategy of trying to be the left wing of the Democratic Party. Despite the limits, Zohran's win shows that New Yorkers and beyond are open to progressive politics, with opportunities for the left to continue reaching more people. His campaign shows that there's space to build a radical program for the working class and youth against genocide and against Trump.
This political moment is opening up the possibility to break with the parties of capitalism. There is space to create something to the left of and independent from the Democratic Party. For example, in the UK, a new party is being formed by Labour politicians Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana, another partially contradictory rejection of the status quo by the left.
The tens of thousands of people who voted for Zohran, who want to improve their living conditions, who want to fight against ICE and Trump's attacks, can be the seeds of a new political organization, a working class party that fights for socialism. And we need to start building it now.
Much of Zohran's massive base of canvassers are already part of the struggles against Trump, against the far right, and against the genocide in Gaza. So the time is right for discussing how to build a fighting strategy for the working class and oppressed beyond the ballot box, to build a working class political organization that fights for socialism.
So that's our episode for today, everyone. But we would love to continue the discussion.
Yes, if you have thoughts about all this, we invite you to hit us up, contribute to the debate on our website, send us a DM. The upcoming elections in this convulsive political moment present an enormous opportunity for discussion around politics, around strategy, and we hope that you'll have it with us.
Drop us a comment or DM anytime, and thanks for listening.
Until next time, solidarity forever.